All right, welcome back. Collective Thought. We finished up. We were giving a shout out to the Masters of None podcast. Initially, the concept of having no specific topic gave me anxiety, but I'm a little bit of a control freak. But either way, for them, I love that it's current events. So every week they have a podcast. Shout out to them. Shout out to them for having Twizzy on the podcast and giving them their platform and then shouting us out, right? So it doesn't have to be even that. Think about that competitively. We talked about that earlier. If I know that they're releasing content every week, why aren't we doing it? So it's almost a being competitive amongst people you respect is a positive thing. It's not a negative thing. On that note, we wrapped up. We talked about parenting, attempting to find the drive, or that I call it, the dog in the kids, reflecting that with parenting. We went into the quick topic of, as a parent, if your child were to commit a crime, would you be able to turn them in? The pros and cons of not doing it and also doing it. And then connecting that with the mind frame of loyalness and somewhere along the time, especially with the technologically advanced era, the social media era, in my opinion, that loyalty has been diminished because everyone really is focused on just getting more notoriety, more attention. But on that note, so one of the things I also, so not only do I work in a school district, I also work in a hospital. I was furloughed because I was not vaccinated, not because I didn't want to get the vaccine, but because I had COVID. So I need to wait 90 days. And sometimes I think with social media, as a social worker, one of our roles is to be a social advocate. And I think that piece is missing now with social media. My niece, who I love, like she's my own child, she does this a lot. And I always tell her, go be a social worker, be that person who makes the change. Because posting is cool, but then what's the next step? What are you going to do with it? And I think me and Rich specifically have been very, what's the word I'm looking for? Cautious. Because we do have to kind of shield our opinions from our place of work. But there's just some stuff that I need to talk about. So vaccination is a hot topic. And with thousands and thousands of people being furloughed on Long Island, where we kind of all originated from. And then with Kyrie Irving, and his situation, I think it's the perfect time to respectfully, and again, I'm going to use this because Eddie's super logical, and logically discuss the vaccination specifically with Kyrie Irving, right? So if you don't know who Kyrie Irving is, he's a point guard for the Brooklyn Nets. I dislike him personally just because he's just not my kind of guy. He doesn't have that integrity that I think he has. But throughout these last few years, he has kind of been a social advocate. So I can't knock him like that. Anyone who has the ability to stand up for himself and to embody people behind him and stand up for them, I can't knock that. So recently he's decided not to get his vaccination for whatever reason he has. And I kind of kept quiet, but as of yesterday, I was so disappointed when Bradley Beal, who is not vaccinated, played in Madison Square Garden. So a person who lives in New York and plays for New York can't play in his home arena because he's not vaccinated, but outside teams can come play. And that just kind of baffled me. And I think it's absolutely ridiculous. That's my opinion. And me and Rich were talking before Eddie got on. Ed was doing his dad work. And my opinion is if he wants to lose whatever millions of dollars per game or hundreds of thousands of dollars per game and willingly does this, and doesn't get his vaccine, then let him do whatever he wants. If his team's okay with that, then that's fine. That's just my personal opinion. But I thought it was so blasphemous that they allow other people to not kind of coincide with the same rules and regulations just because they don't live in New York.
So
what do you think, guys?
So what are you mad at more? That the government doesn't have more overreach? Because those are state rights issues that we're doing. That's a bigger concern.
What's funny, and not even scripted, but I'm looking at this, right? So it says social work and human rights, right? If we're talking about human rights, one of the biggest things for me, and you guys all know this, right? So if I'm being affected by something, you should be affected equally. If we're all on the, I'm 100% into, and what's the word I'm looking for? Everyone should equally be affected by something that's imposed by somebody. But when you have that, what's the word I'm looking, that discrepancy where everyone's not being held to the same accountability and one person's being villainized, I think that is probably what upsets me the most, is that he's being villainized for not being vaccinated, but it's someone on a less social media targeted team is not. So then how do we villainize someone for doing something and someone else is doing it, but he has no social media around him at all?
You already know, we spoke about it real quick earlier, but personally, I feel that the attack on Kyrie all comes from him trying to, he's recently been speaking out on a lot of topics that are not in popular opinion with the masses. Nobody wants to hear it. So it's easy, man, you can villainize this guy so that way people don't have to listen to what he's saying. This has happened to recent sports stars. We all know this already. There's a guy that's not allowed to play in the NFL due to his reasons of what he thought he was doing is the right thing. He was villainized. It became something way bigger than what he started out as. And now look at it. Kyrie's personal feelings of not being vaccinated shouldn't be anybody else's other than his own. There's more than Kyrie in the NBA or in any professional team that's not vaccinated. Why is it that he's the only person that everyone wants to talk about? Kyrie's not going on any media associations. He's not saying nobody else get the vaccine. They ask a question. They say, hey, are you getting vaccinated? He said no. At the end of the day, it should have been the end. Because if you ask me, are you vaccinated? And I say no, I doubt that CNN, ESPN, or any of these other media networks are going to be considered. They don't really care. But the fact that it's Kyrie Irving, he's already had something to say about other things. Let's go ahead and put him in the light now to say, this guy's not getting vaccinated. Why should we listen to anything else he's ever had to say? Personal opinion on it shouldn't matter to the masses. But if you can villainize somebody, why not do it?
Well, I mean, I think we have. Well, I hope he wasn't comparing Kyrie to Cap, because that's a big differential argument.
Well, yeah, he
I hope
was, but
I'm just saying they just.
I think
the
the connection for Rich, and not to speak for Rich, I think he was trying to make the connection that initially it started out as something, and then it was created kind of a different kind of landscape around it. Kind of.
Well, I feel like Kyrie, unfortunately, is in the eye of the storm because we have. He's in the media center of the world, right? So even look at Carmelo, like he was considered a loser in New York. Anybody that comes to New York, they have to overachieve in any way, shape, or form because our media outlets is so ridiculous. Bradley Beal, he's an all-star, he's a great player, but he's in nowhere. What DC, nobody cares. Nobody cares about them media outlets. They're not going to, a player in Oklahoma could be unvaccinated. Nobody cares. New York, California. I mean, like Andrew Wiggins was another person. He's not even
GSW
star, but he was so focused on because he's in Golden State. I think the media outlets, it depends on it. You have ESPN like only miles away, and you have somebody like Stephen A. Smith, who's a New York native, who's going to focus on New York media and make it national news, kind of put a big spotlight on this. Not to mention that, unfortunately, Kyrie, with his past, flat earthers, things like that, kind of put himself in a situation where you kind of like say you put himself in a position where he's like, is he a cancer to that locker room? For better or worse, it sounds like the team for internal reasons are probably using that as a reason to get out of his contract because they already announced they don't want that. So he pigeonholed himself in this, he cornered himself in this situation. But personal opinions aside, I think the problem with the media is that when they're not reporting facts anymore or news, they're reporting opinions. And you put this person a Kyrie Irving that now is going to just put his feet down and go even harder because now he can't get the vaccine if he probably feels like. So even if he was just like, I'm trying to get educated, I'm trying to learn this, for right now, I don't want to do it. You villainized him to the point where now he's going to stand his ground. Now he became a hero to whoever wants him to make him a hero, and you're going to make him a villain to whoever thought he was a villain. So the media, unfortunately, is putting people in these positions where there's no door to left half. It's just toxic, where like you either on the correct side for somebody or the wrong side, and there's no way to bring you back in.
And
that's it.
I think that's a perfect way to state it, because now what it really is the media has just created, is your opinion aligned with this guy or not? And then there's no in between. It's like, now you're for it or you're against it. And kind of
No, but that's what the vaccine's always been, though. It's never been no one has ever been allowed to say, I want to do my research on it, because everybody's like, oh, you're a scientist now. It's like, guy, allow me to do what I need to do for myself so I'm comfortable.
right.
And the problem is that nobody wants to hear that. Everybody wants to just jump onto it and say, hey, if you're not doing it, then it means you're against it.
The problem and the problem with the whole I'm gonna do my research statement is that, are you asking your doctor or are you going on YouTube?
No,
Right?
of course, we know that the reality is people that say I'm doing my research, they're not doing research. They're just waiting to see what the popular opinion is. And if it sounds good, then you go with that. Like, hey, they're not getting a vaccine because of this, or this person got their vaccine, so I follow what
we
they say.
politicize everything now, and we're I think back to the first subject, we become a society of clout chasers and victims. We chase to be a victim, or we chase to be a some sort of clout chasing. And now everybody is on these situations where there's no gray anymore. There's no central idea. It's either you're right or left. And now even a vaccine that's supposed to help people is either when Trump was president, he supposedly did the warp speed, which, like he said, he funded it, and then when he realized he didn't fund it, now it becomes he's against the vaccine, and he doesn't even promote it. So you have these this portion where now the vaccine is just a political. If you're a certain side of the spectrum, you're not going to go at it just because you feel like you gave in to the opposite political ideology that you have, and it's kind of insane if you think about it.
Right. And I think that's perfect, because that's what I'm going to say. So think about something that is, and we don't know yet. We don't know if it's going to harm us physically or help us physically. And again, and unscripted, like I said, so human rights, right? And that's my biggest thing. So we talk about the macro, right? So Eddie, in social work, macro is the big stuff, like the global stuff, right? And then it goes down to micro, which is us, right? So right now, this is a micro kind of conversation. But the big conversation, Kyrie, and what I really want to bring it down to is kind of Long Island with the nurses, right? So that topic of Kyrie and his job playing basketball for millions and millions of dollars. But think about Long Island with these nurses, these doctors. My sister works in the ER. She was already vaccinated. But think about I'm thinking about all the nurses that I know personally in my hospital that worked through the COVID pandemic. And then at that time, there wasn't even a vaccine. So now that the vaccine is kind of a lot more contained than it was, it's like now there's, what is it, 37,000 I read on Newsday, Eddie? I forgot that you're in city, but I think there's 37,000 hospital employees that are now without a job, unable to collect unemployment because of their choice to not have that vaccine.
Well, I mean, in New York, and I could be wrong, you have to take the flu shot. You have to be up to date in vaccinations.
Now, it's funny, and that's in our lovely group chat with your brother. I was doing something else, but I every year decline my flu vaccine. So you don't need to have your vaccine. You can decline it.
And that's only 40% effective, and supposedly this vaccine is over 90% effective.
Yeah.
So
but
you have people in the medical field.
And I'm going to bring it back up, right? So human rights. We talk about human rights randomly, right? This book was here. This one's brand new. I bought 2 of them, right? So human rights wise, that's really, and we'll go back to your first question, Eddie. That's what kind of bothers me the most, is the fact that human rights, in my opinion, aren't being respected. I just think people should have the choice at this point, especially. And again, Kyrie was just kind of a way to kind of get you guys sucked in and bring it down to the micro level of Long Island and the nurses and the doctors, and even think about, just hospital staff, the cleaners who don't have the ability to work now because in my opinion, their human rights right now are being violated because, and that's perfect, Eddie, that flu vaccine. I have the ability to say, nah, I'm good. I don't need it. But you don't have that ability with the COVID vaccine.
Well, for a couple of decades, I had to get vaccines that I definitely probably wouldn't have gotten, but
good. So remind our crowd, Sergeant, where were you?
Well, I was a lot of places. We'll just say a lot of places. But I had to get a lot of.
What was the governing body that made you get those?
No,
vaccines?
we don't look. The U.S. military. It was just
there you go.
And it's still happening right now. It's been mandated that all service members, all government, federal employees have to get the vaccine. Easiest people to get. It's like if you sign a contract to be in the military, you're going to get the vaccine whether you want to or not. or deal with the consequences. Same thing with federal employees. If you don't want the vaccine, here's the limit, here's the time limit. You don't get it, you don't have a job. End of story. That's the easiest way to push it on everybody else. Once again, I understand with the human right versus the political statement, but at the end of the day, you take away a person's livelihood, they stop thinking about their human rights. Like, people went through this past year and a half without, by the grace, most people were able to survive in it. But there were a lot of people that hit rock bottom that if I have to get a vaccine to make sure I don't hit that point again, then so be it, give me the vaccine. But then there are a lot of people that are really like, listen, I'll figure something else out, but I don't feel comfortable getting the vaccine, which once again, I don't think anybody should feel that they need to get it. But when you start taking away from people's natural rights to be able to live, now you're forcing them to do something that they naturally don't want to do. It's not they're not, by them getting or not receiving the vaccine, it's not changing what they're capable of doing.
So
now the people that fill in those positions now, just because they got the vaccine, are those the people like our healthcare workers? Do you really want those people that are like, well, I got the vaccine, here I am, hire me? Just asking.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't want somebody that doesn't believe in science taking care of me, but let's
right.
just
That's what I'm saying. but they got the vaccine, so it's like, hey, you're good.
Right. So now let's not even move past that point. So think about that, guys. So hold on one second, Eddie. So think about that point. So now 37,000 Long Island workers, right, who are obviously,
how many of them are doctors?
Capable enough to work as a nurse, doctor, whatever it is, right? And then think about that. So now there needs to be some mass hiring, right? Just because you have a vaccine now, boom, you're in. Like, think about that. People who believe in that, yeah. So in theory, so in social work, we use evidence-based practice, right? So and doctors use evidence-based medicine. You wouldn't take something that doesn't have evidence that it works. So I feel, my biggest thing is if these high quality workers through the pandemic were available to work, who's coming in now? And shouldn't that scare people, that people who were not initially qualified to get a job against the people who have the jobs now may be available to have the jobs?
Well, who's to say it wasn't qualified? It maybe just opened up jobs for other people.
I was going to say that too. Like,
that's a really big generalized statement. My question also is, I would like to know, of the people that work in these hospitals, what position levels are the ones that are losing the most jobs? Is it like the guy giving you the tray of food, or is it the actual doctor that says, you know what,
but
I
even
did my research, and
I love this conversation because even those numbers would be skewed because you don't need 100 doctors, but you're going to need 100 nurses, right?
Because I'm thinking, and I look at, and again, the news is skewed, but I see like hospital workers, and I'm looking at my social media feed, and it sounds really rude, but a lot of those people I wouldn't take life advice from, and now I'm looking at them, I'm like, you worked in these situations? Like, I'm
no, but look at let's say it's only like maybe 10%. 10% of those are doctors and nurses. That's still 3,700 people just in Long Island, right? Like 37,000. I doubt it's all doctors, nurses, LPNs, whatever the case may be. But let's say it's just 10% of those people are doctors and nurses. That's still a significant amount of people that technically are supposed to be our medical experts. Like, we will sit in the room with them and they can say, you're going to die in 10 days, and we will believe them. And those are the same 3,700 people that are like, I don't want to get the vaccine. And now we have to deal with 3,700 new people that, whatever their opinion is the reason that they're not there, or the reason that they are there. I think that a lot of times, and it's just, it's just going to be marketed the same way. It's either you have it or you don't.
Yeah.
And then regardless of what your personal opinion is, it's not going to matter because everyone's already had a preconceived thought process on why you don't have it or why you did get it. There are going to be a lot of people, I honestly believe, that are going to get it just because I don't want to lose my job. There are some people that are legit going to walk away from their professions just because they don't want the vaccine. And we're still gonna look at them for whatever reason and say they didn't get the vaccine because of this, but we'll never understand why they don't get it or why they did get it. So
the bigger question, I think, and Joe brought up, was the rights, right? So are you really losing your rights if you had the ability to step away from your job and go to another job and now start a whole new profession because you do not want the vaccine? Because technically speaking, if you were really losing your rights, you'd be thrown in jail or murdered or whatever the case may be because of your difference of this vaccine. Is it really losing your rights? Are we got to, how like everybody uses like the next Hitler, Trump is the next Hitler, Bush is the next Hitler, Obama's the next Hitler. Are we like using this like rights word a little bit too freely about.
Well, I think a lot of it ties into is that when you're losing your livelihood, you're technically taken away from your human rights. Like if you're losing your job, your career, whatever the case may be, if you are a medical professional, whatever the case, if that's what you do, you lose that career, you've lost your right to provide. You're losing a human right to live your normal life now, or even live a life that you have built for yourself. That takes away from now. Human rights are, okay, you're not allowed to have, you can't have a TV in your home. You're not allowed to have cable. You can't have a luxury vehicle. That's not something that I look at it as.
No, and that's why I want to like, I think we bundle too many things together. We kind of generalize everything, right? Like wearing a mask, like this is human rights. I'm like, is it really you're losing your human rights? Like you can't get Chipotle inside the store, you get it delivered now. Like,
but it's still the same thing. It's like the human right is I have the option of, now this is the problem though. You have the option of wearing a mask. Mm-hmm. They say you can't enter a restaurant without wearing a mask or being vaccinated. Cool. If you choose not to wear the mask, then you chose not to go to that restaurant. That's just common sense to me. You can't argue the fact that Chipotle will not let you in without a mask because it's your human right. They have the right to not allow you in there as well. But when you start telling people that you can't have the career that you worked for because you refuse to get a vaccine, now that's a difference. You're taking away from something that you can't force me to get something. Like you're telling people like, hey, maybe you get a medical waiver for it for somehow. Maybe you can get a religious reason. Like you're trying to give people scapegoats to get away from it, but it's like not doing the right thing. Like if I don't have this vaccine, now if you told me this vaccine today would cure me, like for a fact that 100% nothing will happen to you, I guarantee more people will get it. But once it started coming to light where it's like, hey, we know you got the vaccine, but you also now have COVID. Sorry about that. How do you convince a person that's on the fence to get it to now want to get it?
Well,
and let me jump in real quick.
That's the media.
So Eddie, real quick. So I think what's important to point out is number one, and just for the viewers, the first thing is that our numbers, people get caught up on numbers. So our numbers, I think it may be that number 37,000. I don't know. I don't have the article in front of me. So just want to make that disclaimer. And the second part too. So human right. So a quick Google search. Right from Oxford Dictionary, right? So human right simply is a right that is believed to belong justifiably to every person. So, and not to kind of contradict Eddie, but think about that. So even the ability to have or not have the vaccine, if you're forced to have it, then yes, it's a human rights issue. Even the mask, right? I should, in theory, have the ability to wear it or not. So even though you may not strongly think about that, but yes, it's human rights. So of course there's big degrees of magnitude of different human rights, but in theory, if everyone should have the ability to or not to do something, then that's taken away, then it's definitely an infringement upon human rights, regardless of the perspective.
Infringes on somebody else's rights.
Well,
you don't have the right to
so again,
fire in a theater.
We're still continuing the topic of human rights, right? So what's our human rights?
Again, that's a really, it's a gray area here because the mask situation, right? So let's jump in quick to the mask, right? So if we are known that this virus is shooting out, right, from the sneeze or a cough, and a mask protects the person in front of you.
Viral, right? That's
it's a viral, it's airborne, et cetera, and the mask is here to protect you. Your right to wear to refuse that mask, doesn't supersede like my right to like not have you sneezing on me, right? Same thing with smoking. You can smoke, go outside. You can't smoke inside of the school. You can't smoke inside because I need to have fresh air as well. So like there are rights. Like nobody, I'm sure smokers when they first did that was like, oh, I have a right to smoke inside the diner, but now you're infringing on somebody else's rights. So I think when it comes to something like a mask, we have the right to not have that situation of a virus being airborne in that location. If it supersedes your own rights, you could eat outside. That's a perfectly reasonable solution. So I just think that, again, I think with the social media aspect, we try to be victims very, very quickly. Everybody's either clout chasing or just trying to become a superhuman victim of something, and not to get on these other subjects, but the Twitter world generation is really crazy, where it's like you ask them to do anything that will protect other people besides yourself, it immediately becomes this like tyrant, World War II, Hitler's coming to get you because of a mask or whatever the case may be, or the devil's coming to get you.
And think about, perspective is such a big thing, in theory, we're a sociology, social work based podcast. So my perspective and your perspective and Rich's are so different. And this is, and for the viewers, this is why I intentionally kind of gave a shot of text to Edward, because he's opinionated in this specific discussion. But for me, my job, and I think my personality has always been like this. I think about today as a coach, my job is to protect these kids. My job is to protect my kids specifically. And I think what I'm seeing more too is, and again, and you guys know me both, I'm not an anti-vax or anything, but I think once we start letting these kind of gray area human rights stuff be allowed, I read the other day about California imposing the vaccination for 5-year-olds to 8-year-olds. And I'm like, what? 5-year-olds now are doing?
No, like 5 to 12, I believe.
5 that's
11.
5 to 12.
They did emergency
5 to 11. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So think about that. So, and it's not really about, human rights specifically. I'm not like that, but I think once we start allowing that gray area stuff to happen, then it's almost like push the envelope. My opinion, if we're thinking about vaccinating 5-year-olds, I think my job then, and this is why I have not kind of spoke out about this, but I have to now. So even as an educator, it's my job to see what's best for my students. And I don't think kids in my district really should, at 5 years old, be getting a vaccine. And that's just my opinion. But again, and my job and my perspective in this
I think
role,
we're all speaking a little bit out of ignorance because we're not doctors, and we all have to speak to our personal doctors and physicians to get the right answer. But because we think about it, right, and we talk about the fear of this vaccine, right? But I have a newborn daughter, and she's only 2 months, and I just saw her get injected with like 3 different shots to be vaccinated and whatever the case may be. I don't even know at this point what's going on, polio, all this stuff, right? So I'm sure that my parents, in their generation, experienced the first rounds of polio vaccines and the fear behind it, and the flu epidemic and the Spanish flu. These things had to get eradicated somehow, to the point where we are with the ability to say no to the flu shot. But if you think about it, when the Spanish flu was first out, you should have got that shot. Right now we're to the point where it's almost eradicated. We still have people that die from the flu in these poorer countries that don't have the money to get the shots available for them. Like, we could go to a CVS right now and just get one for free, and it's purchased because we're doing it. I mean, even the current COVID vaccine, like the rest of the world pretty much hates us because we're at a point where we are buying it, the first ones to get it from Moderna and Pfizer, and we're just throwing them away because there's people just like we have all this access, and we're like, oh, I'll do my research on YouTube, I'll figure it out, right? and then they're gonna change your DNA. Like, it's possible. Like, listen, buddy, I seen your family. I think you should change your DNA. But but we have this whole mindset of like us versus the government, no matter, which is cool because that's what America's about. We're supposed to kind of like not trust the government 100%, but we look at all these situations in different portions of vaccines, like why this one specifically kind of boggles my mind. And again, maybe it's because I currently live in New York City, where we were hit the hardest, right? It was, I think I sent you pictures when I was riding my bike in Times Square, where it was like the Will Smith movie. It was like nobody was there. It was super scary.
I was with you. How do you not forget the 200-pound guy that was with you, Eddie? What's going on?
Yeah. So like, and it's in my building alone has the capacity of some small towns, right? So I can understand why somebody in a small town is like, I live like 40 miles away from my next door neighbor. So, what is this social distances? But like, I'm seeing this firsthand where in order to go to school for my daughter, we have to go in an elevator, meet strangers, have masks on, so maybe my perception is a little bit different. I'm a little bit more
good. And I was gonna pull you back in. So think about perception. This is why, Rich, who's in Tennessee, you're who is in New York City, and even me, who's on Long Island, had such different perspectives. And think about the roles we play in our lives, right? So me and Rich have kind of similar jobs, but they're totally different, and you have a completely different job. So perspective is such a good thing. And again, this is just for conversation, guys. And guys, I mean, whoever's watching. But this is exactly why this kind of 3-person panel was chosen, was just to give multiple perspectives and all. So we're running out of time again. We wanted to try to give you clear, concise stuff. We have a few minutes left. But again, for the viewers who wanted these kind of short, compact things, I got to thank Eddie for popping up short notice, literally 5 minutes before we went on, being a fill-in. I guess you're gonna have to fight Twizzy for the spot of co-host, but it should be a good fight, and you have that competitive nature.
Twizzy's been in the gym though.
So he can finally do push-ups and pull-ups now. But with a few minutes left, man, again, I think my biggest perspective is as a parent, and again, hopefully eventually get into kind of Eddie's story, his parenting, which I'm super proud of, and especially his drive to kind of finish a marathon because nobody's been there. So maybe we could coerce him from that. But again, with a few minutes, Rich, you got anything else to say?
Just the biggest things, like always listening. I enjoy hearing everybody's perspective on different, especially parenting, and seeing it from different angles. And it's definitely a breath of fresh air to hear adult men speaking about parenthood.
Exactly.
Dads don't get the credit that they deserve. We know Father's Day is like a forgotten holiday. So I commend both of you on being great fathers. And definitely, Eddie, thank you for coming on, because hearing a different opinion, and actually having, like, not saying I saw this on YouTube or I saw somebody else, my friend told me, like, as long as you didn't start sentences like that, I can listen to everything you were saying. So I want to thank you. And definitely we can't wait to get you on it. So it'll be the Eddie show. So we'll go ahead and get you interviewed as well.
There we go. We got to plug him in. We got to promote him. What else? Got anything else, Eddie, before we sign off?
No, I appreciate being invited on. Like everything you guys said was super insightful. Like, I think the fact that I'm leaving this conversation, actually having learning the different perspectives of it all, is what this whole thing is about. Please, in the comments, don't at me. I'm not. I'm willing to listen to everybody's opinion, and
they have to be logical. And again, and that's why I preface that term.
I think that's the big key is logical and respectful, because again, everything's becoming political. Everything's becoming so either left or right, when there is okay to be in the middle, and there's having wanted to hear both sides and make up your mind.
Absolutely. On a final note, I went to, just texting some of my hospital coworker friends, and, they were like, "Oh, you got furloughed?" And one guy texted me and he's like, "What, do you not care about anybody else?" Without having the ability to be like, I'm waiting my 90 days to get my vaccine. But thank you for being so media oriented, whereas, like, just because I don't have it, I hate everybody and I want everybody to die. That's not what it's about. There's small things in between that. On that note, again, guys, Eddie, thanks again. And, here at Collective Thought, AYN, follow us on Instagram. If you haven't heard the podcast, that's one of the big things. You can find us on, what do you got, Rich? Spotify you're on? What else?
We got on Spotify is the biggest one. They can also look it up on Anchor. We'll always have we'll plug them into the description on the YouTube channel.
Right. And then, of course, we're on our YouTube at Collective Thought AYN, and Instagram, Collective Thought AYN. On that note, Eddie, thanks again. Rich, always great to see you, my brother. And we'll see you guys soon. Have a good night, guys. All right.